It's all over. Shut it down, folks. This is it. That Mercedes has won the world title already just by looks alone. Well, you see, ladder fans, I not only love this car, but I'm also kind of intimidated in what Toto's been saying, because he's been really, really calm and stoic, like the good old days. The most hyped livery of the pre-season, because Audi's concept was a bit of a reheat, I'm not gonna lie, did not disappoint. The W17 livery has dropped and is expected to do some shakedown laps not long after, and honestly, it's a stunner. I posted a short about it to give my initial impressions, like literally a couple of minutes after it launched, but having had some time to cool off and write this more prepared script, I am just as hyped. This is still a fantastic livery, and I've actually loved the recent Mercedes liveries of the last couple of years. The 17, it's yet another stunner, yet they can't seem to quite get the airbox right. Either it's got a weird Toto Rosso patch with Ineos, or it's a strangely vacant silver gap, or this time, a Microsoft logo that clashes with everything else. It's a small detail, sure, but hey, if Microsoft is willing to pay an estimated $60 million a year for the privilege, I guess they get to carve their logo however they want. But seriously, this top-down angle, oh, that seals it for me. It just works from every perspective. And hey, if you look at it from the front, you can't even see the Microsoft logo. There you go, sorted. But let me know what you think about the livery in the comments, because from my initial impressions of the comments I've seen from just my other posts on socials, it's a bit divisive, this particular livery, and I'm usually along with the grain of everyone else. This time I feel like I'm in the minority. I'm serious. This is my favourite livery in a very long time. And you might also want to know what Toto Wolff's first words of the new season have been, and it's not been the usual fixation on, yes, we want to be the fastest car, we're going to be very, very competitive and stuff like that. No. He's actually sounding quite dry, yet also kind of scary. So here are his words for your consideration, and to try and alleviate the tone and make you feel a little bit less scared of him, I'll do the accent. Ahem. F1 will undergo significant change in 2026, and we are prepared for that transition. The new regulations demand innovation and absolute focus across every area of performance. Our work on the new car and the long-term development of the power unit and advanced sustainable fuels with Petronas reflects that approach. Releasing the first images of the W17 is simply the next step in that process. It represents the collective sustained efforts of our team in Brixworth and Brackley. We will continue to push hard in the months ahead. He didn't talk about George, he didn't talk about the chassis, he talked about the transition itself. The biggest transition in F1's recent history, in fact, probably its entire history. And around the three main pillars of his car. The car itself, the engine, and of course the fuel. Not many people are talking about the fuel, yet Toto decides to run with it with the Petronas element. And that all of these are no longer individual departments, they're all one glorious whole. All of them working to the best of their ability, which again includes the design team, because this livery, really love it, I really do. Thusly, Toto's words give the livery new meaning. A brand new flag in which to plant into the battleground as their colours, them trooping said colours with pride. Mercedes literally describing on their own website, the design carries a dynamic Petronas green flow line that swooshes across the car, bridging the silver heritage into the black modern identity which Lewis Hamilton showcased with massive impact in 2020, one of their most dominant seasons, and in fact, their last dominant season. Yeah, you can laugh about this until the cows come home. I usually do, or I tend to roll my eyes because I've seen it time and time again. But this time, there's just something about this which feels a little bit different, that we're no longer seeing a Mercedes that we've gotten used to the last couple of years, where they've just lamented about how they used to be great, and that it's not the same F1 as the good old days, and that they're trying everything they can, or they're apologising to their fans for not getting things right, fearful that they might actually come a-knocking and then no longer buy their merchandise. It's been a long ride for them the last few years, hasn't it? And also the metaphors that they've been using are actually kind of honest this time around, because I think 2026 is very much about going with the flow, and there's a lot of flowing going on. Because you're talking about energy flows, you're talking about data flows, you're talking about air flows, work flows, everything is just flowing that little bit differently than it was in 2025 and prior. And again, there's a lot more change coming around aside from all of the power unit stuff, because that has been very much the watchword which Mercedes themselves are fighting with the FIA today, actually. But instead, they are pointing to every single element that is going on with this car, including, again, the synthetic fuels, which is a very big proponent of these brand new changes, which Aramco very much wants to make the most of, considering that they've actually had a year getting their eye in with Formula 2 and Formula 3. Petronas, they very much want to make use of their own experience and their collective success, what with McLaren as well, to really hit the ground running, and Mercedes seems to be more than happy in giving them the breathing space and putting them on that same pedestal as them. 2026 will be the season which is defined by the team that has the least amount of surprises and pretty much gets the whole widget right. And their own socials point to it. The new era starts here. So therefore, what Toto's saying is that the battleground is bigger than ever, and that they're announcing they're no longer building a paltry car which happens to be quite good. No, they're showcasing their brand new identity, that they built an operating system for racing which has now finally adapted itself to the cost cap era, because you've got to admit, the last few years were rough for them when the team couldn't simply spend their way out of a problem with unlimited funds, because the last few years they have been very much constrained in having to rethink the way they actually go racing and bring up certain upgrades or to try and get themselves around a fundamental problem. The fundamental problem being is that they got ground effect disastrously wrong. Now though, we are seeing a Mercedes which has been able to evolve within those constraints, and even though the cost cap for this year is that fair bit higher than it was last year, there are other factors involved which sort of diminish the significance of that particular chestnut. It's bigger, but it's not as big of a deal. We now see a Mercedes which is smarter, they're faster, they're leaner, they just seem to be a little bit more posed. Toto using his first statement of the season to talk about the car and the fuel and the engine instead of their drivers and hoping to go for a world title, that is really curious and also really unnerving. So here we are. We get the W17 reveal where the team explicitly leans into their new era tech. Then you get the Microsoft partnership that was announced just a couple of hours prior to the livery launch. That's saying out loud that that tech is going at the heart of race team operations, and that this deal will aid in expanding simulation, analysis and strategy modeling, all that kind of jazz. And just to make the whole thing extra spicy, we have to remember about Toto selling part of his stake to CrowdStrike CEO George Kurtz, who is not only a tech heavyweight, but is also a keen amateur racer, but also a techie advisor. So it just feels like he's not just some guy with a big wallet or anything like that. Kind of might actually go some way as to explain why we got the CrowdStrike logo so blazingly put on the Mercedes safety car. It's because CrowdStrike really does like its racing. And with Mr. Kurtz's arrival as a minority stakeholder, that threesome that was once around as Mercedes Elite has now become a foursome. So you put them all together, and you're getting the Mercedes that we are seeing right now. They're looking like a technology firm that just so happens to go racing on Sundays as well. And that they're basically ready for anything, because they've had to deal with a lot of things the last few years, and the next season will be all about trying to figure out whatever all of these different elements that are being introduced will hurl at particular teams. It's all about suffering the least amount of surprises and actually being able to roll with the punches to get to what's real. And after all the trials and tribulations they've been suffering through with the W13 and 14 and 15 and kind of the 16 really, you feel like Mercedes is just about ready for any eventuality going, that they've had to suffer so many embarrassments and indignations and lamentations that I don't think really anything can faze them anymore. I don't think we're going to be getting a team that's going to be left flat-footed or spending months and months apologizing to their fans for getting it absolutely wrong and fearing their scorn anymore. In fact, I don't really think they're fearing anything. Especially Toto, because after having so many years of success with Lewis and the team just getting better and better and better, after that suddenly went away, you really felt like the events of 2021, especially when you read Ted Kravitz's book, the way he had to let off steam after Abu Dhabi, after that, it got to a more emotional Toto, where the difficulties of 2022 especially, in not being able to change the frigging car, meant that really they were left completely aimless and wondering, trying to find out what was exactly wrong with their car, and they just couldn't do it. But the way Toto is speaking right now is absolute nerd speak, and that kind of nerd speak is a certain section of Formula One fans' music. That they really wanted to hear this. They did not want to hear any more about, gelling with the fans and the auras and the memes and stuff like that. And trust me, the Mercedes admin is very much all about the memes, but they want to hear the team leaders talking about the technological potential. And with the Microsoft deal especially, I feel that might have gotten across the line after Toto looked at what happened over at Williams with Atlassian and how that team has been able to turn that software partner into a real important part of their upward stake toward the front-running pack, that, hey, maybe he might want to get some of that action too with a software partner. And I would certainly say Mercedes has done much better than Atlassian. I mean, Atlassian are good, but there are plenty of jokes around them, and they will be continuing to do so. But Microsoft, oh, actually, no, there are plenty of jokes about Microsoft too. So big money, and big assets and tools and wherewithal. And this deal might actually lead us to the belief that Mercedes reckons that software is performance these days, presenting themselves as steadfast and ready for the unknown, which is kind of what Max Verstappen is having to look at over at Red Bull, uncertain about how Ford and his team will carry themselves and muddle through. But he seems ready for the challenge and isn't looking at a sudden move, yet. But going back to software. In the old world, you could just talk about the engines and the aero being the only things in F1 that mattered, the two absolute gods, and yeah, the two gods are still there, but they now have a new high priest, the person who decides when to use all the electric aids that just so happens to be called Rob. Recharge, overtake and boost. And with what Mercedes has been up to and what they're talking about, they can easily say, well, Bob's your uncle. Being able to pull that kind of sponsor away from Alpine, a long-term partner of Team Enstone, mind you, even back in the Lotus days, that is a little bit of a coup in the F1 sponsors world. All of this pointing towards Mercedes wanting to find every single ounce of performance possible, even in the stuff that you can't possibly see, the software element of it. But then at the same time, though, they are having to suffer the revelation that they will be losing a very key proponent of car design, the director of car design even. One, John Owen. And even though Mr. Owen hasn't actually come across my radar before now, it is still, when you actually look down at it, a bit of a bitter pill to swallow, but thankfully, not an abrupt one. It's not the case of a sudden brain drain. But yes, it may look like they're losing a key brain right as the rules change, and this guy had been around since the Honda days and the Brawn days, plenty of titles under his belt, so the timing feels absolutely awful at first glance. But it does seem more like a planned handoff now that the 2026 car is out in the open. And also, and again, he's leaving later in the year, with engineering director Giacomo Tortora taking over as director of car design, under deputy technical director Simone Resta, and the lead tech director James Allison. So the big names are still there, but one of their own has decided to move on. And when you look at those different names, an engineering director taking on his job, and Simone Resta is also a technical director, you feel like Mercedes are moving towards integrated engineering instead of just long-running car design. Everything is now headed toward one central point, instead of just being one thing here, one thing there, one thing here, one thing there. And maybe Mercedes are trying to avoid relying on one sole person being their hero designer, as in not having to put all of their eggs in one particular basket to try and make themselves a good car, that everything should be working together. It's the complete opposite of what's going on over at Aston Martin, where the message there is believe in Newey, believe in Newey, please believe in Newey. And we got Toto right at the top waving a Petronas green flag saying that Formula One is now a factory sport and not a driver's sport, that it's all about the team, it's all about the engineers, it's about the entire collective rather than a bunch of personalities, which I think is at the core of Mercedes' reinvention in the post-Hamilton era, where it was all about the driver, about the personality, about his collection of wins, the domination. We won't be getting that anymore at that team. Toto will not allow it. Not with George, not with Kimi, not even with Max if they actually get their way in that regard. And it might actually explain why we had the saga of Russell and Antonelli's contracts dragging out for even longer than they usually let it out to drag. When Lewis was pulled away from McLaren and allowed to speak his mind and be free and true to himself, that was vital in securing his services for the project. But now, they no longer have to do that, Mercedes. They've arrived at a very important point in their lives, and while Lewis is struggling to get his way in edgeways over at Ferrari, with far more restriction, his former team are busy rebuilding their identity around the machine, not the men. Which may explain why we were all shocked at their callousness over George's position, and why they do not like long-term contracts. Even though they are graduates of the junior program, those two drivers are pawns. They are replaceable pawns. And it very much reminds me of the extremely engineered angle that we saw back at Williams in the 1990s especially. Doesn't matter how good you are, if you don't gel well with the engineering side of things, then you could easily be ejected. You can be replaced by somebody better. And when that person becomes surplus to requirements or an even better person comes along, then they can be replaced too. And yes, Max can easily be replaced too. I don't think he will be allowed the same freedoms and courtesies to divert himself away from the Mercedes message, all about data and finding performance and going racing. But when you stop to think about it, you might want to get the spanner out a little bit. Maybe this is something that might appeal to Max Verstappen, the pursuit of racing and doing everything that it takes to try and get it over the line. And it also helps by being successful on the track too. And that perhaps makes the livery hype feel more meaningful, at least in my opinion, because the car looking this coherent is the aesthetic version of what Mercedes are trying to do internally, having one line that connects everything, the Petronas green flow. But nevertheless, the driver situation is a pertinent one. Yes, Kimi and George were confirmed, but only for this year. The public message very careful about that fact. They laboured about that hard, keeping options open without destabilising the present, because they did earn their keep last year. If something better does come along, they could easily be ejected. They are no longer Mercedes, emotionally beholden to them. And whilst Max has signalled his commitment to Red Bull, the way Toto is setting his team up does also line up with the Verstappen-shaped shadow, regardless, because Mercedes, I think, are trying to recruit Max in public without recruiting him in public. The way of the flirtations I've seen in recent times have been a little bit more discreet, businesslike, behind the scenes, away from Formula One, and all to do with Max's other passion in life, GT3. And yes, I know, we all talked about this when Aston Martin signed a deal with Max Verstappen's GT team, Verstappen.com Racing, and that didn't go anywhere. He's not an Aston Martin now, but you just have to compare the two. Aston Martin maybe wanted to become a dominant force in racing, but Mercedes, they have the capacity to do what they want, and Wolff has not been shy in shoving his weight around to make things happen. Because Toto is tapping into something that Max really values, his main source of pride coming from having total control over his life and freedom to do whatever he wants, such as partaking in the Nürburgring 24 hours. And it requires specific licensing and participation steps. And what really got me interested is that Autosport reported that Verstappen had strong backing from Mercedes management as they worked together on a possible appearance at that event. And I will admit, that surprised me. Because you've heard me talk about this before, I wasn't really sure whether or not Mercedes would be this accommodating anymore, that Toto would be this free and forgiving to allow Max to do what he pleases outside of Formula One, because that is appealing to a megastar. But then again, if the megastar is repping your own machinery in different sporting categories, that can't be that bad of an arrangement, because it all goes back towards the technical pursuit of success and glory. It's not a case of Lewis Hamilton going off to do a fashion show or filming something away from the Mercedes spotlight. No. If Toto secured the services of Max, you could bet your bottom dollar he would be repping Mercedes in every aspect of his life, and contributing to successes in different racing categories and pursuits. So as far as Mercedes is concerned, they'd be getting a pretty good bang for their buck. But make no mistake, I feel like Toto would definitely lay down the law when it comes to, managing his drivers in particular, because whoever partners up with Max at that team, if they are successful in getting him, it's going to be a rough ride. But hey, Wolff's got plenty of experience. He is, after all, Formula One's dinosaur by his own admission. And the best way to appease the Dutchman is to provide him an ecosystem. A works manufacturer can do a lot of favours without it looking like a favour, because Mercedes can offer Max GT3 cars, the support, the logistics, the political help with the boring admin parts of racing in other series that may not necessarily get what Max is all about, because that's what Max is doing right now and what he did last year to try and get all of that out of the way. So that means when he does leave Formula One, he can get into GT racing almost immediately without any hurdles to jump through. The W17 is the billboard to try and tempt Max even more, to showcase that they have the best chance in nailing this particular era of Formula One, at least for the next few seasons, whilst Max Verstappen has definitely dedicated himself to the series, at least through 2028, when he heads into his early 30s. After that, he's not entirely sure himself what he'll be doing. He'll certainly not be around here when he approaches 40. We're not getting a Fernando situation here, or a Lewis situation, or maybe in the next couple of years a Nico Hülkenberg situation. And one aspect of showing how serious Mercedes are being right now, they are talking up the fuel side of things. I cannot stress this enough. It's going to be a very important part, especially when it comes to that supposed compression ratio thing. If you can get as much potency out of that fuel and then squeeze it and blow it and explode it and get as more power out of your engine for less cost, because this synthetic fuel will be expensive, it's a really new technology, then all the better. And then they've got Microsoft coming in to bolster their understanding of software, and that becoming an increasing part of the entire widget, such as the simulation tools and electrical systems, because it is a 50-50 split. And the new co-owner who totally gets what Mercedes is all about. They are not a newcomer rando. There's also the commercial strength in that Microsoft deal in them not adhering to Mercedes' colour palette, and yet still providing a car which still looks pretty cool in the pit lane. And seemingly, with all the extracurricular activities, they are willing to help out Max's off-menu racing dreams without even flinching. That, to Max, is pure, utter catnip. Helps that he likes his cats too. And whilst that temptation is there and ripe for the picking almost, Russell can still act as a stabilising force this year, right now, at the beginning of it all, with Antonelli being there as the additional lottery ticket with a rocket strapped to it, having also come within a gnat's wing of outscoring the man he replaced at Mercedes all by just a few points. That would have been a huge achievement for the Italian Verstappen. But we'll see what happens throughout the year, because 2027 will be the decision point. It will explain why so many contracts are up for renewal at the end of this coming season, because nobody is quite sure where everyone is going to be. But everyone is certainly looking at Mercedes and are thinking, yes, they are going to be the dominant force again. It may not be as dominant as it was in 2014, but they will certainly be off to an early lead. And hey, for at least the first couple of seasons, we'll ideally like to be there, please, thank you. And we'll also know for sure whether or not Antonelli is the next hot property, or he's just somebody who has still got a little bit of cooking left to do. We'll then also know whether or not George Russell is a future world champion, or the world champion, or just simply a very good driver, a very good placeholder, a tenant for someone to eventually replace him. Because giving them that 1-year extension and nothing more, that was pure utter leverage to show those two drivers that we do like you, but you are not the most important thing going right now. There are many other people more important to the cause than you, which includes the people who are contributing towards producing the fuel, making the car, producing the engine. They matter more than you do if you don't pull your weight. And if you don't, go. I mean, look at poor George. He may have gotten a nice salary out of his 1-year extension, but he couldn't even get an AMG 1 for his troubles. I mean, poor guy. But yes, I can certainly tell you right now that the Mercedes of the post-Hamilton era is now here. We now know exactly what it is. It is not about domination and focusing themselves around one man solely. It's all about restructuring and reinvention, and the drivers are not the center of their universe anymore. They cannot be. They will never be again. And what Toto said at the beginning of this video lines up with all of that. And yes, Max is a megastar in of himself, a generational talent and whatnot, but he could also be a very useful cog in many other aspects of Mercedes that carry a lot of weight in terms of racing. You put that man in a different car, in a different sport, you still continue to earn your keep. And that's the Mercedes future in one sentence. The pretty car right here, that's just the wrapping. The gift inside is a faster way of thinking, a faster way to go with the flow instead of scratching your head all the time, and a nice bit of a return to the classic sandbagging in a way. Wolff not promising glory right from the start, but months ahead of pushing themselves instead. A warning. The kind of warning you only give when you're building something that doesn't need hype to be dangerous. And it reminds me of that famous quip from Drive to Survive, which really did not age well. You know the one. In fact, you probably know it so well, I just need to put a picture up. You get what I mean, right? And what I mean right now is for you to head on over to this video, because I reckon you will really like this one, with, like Microsoft, some software backing up that assertion. See you over there.